They told me it was a waste of energy to dream, that a house like that was only for my brother. That night, I silently screenshotted an account balance large enough to write one single check. 3 weeks later, the entire city stood under my glass staircase, and my family was struck silent when I said, "Welcome to my home." My name is Harper Lang, and I have learned that the most profound silences are not the peaceful ones, but the ones filled with things deliberately left unsaid. I was late. Again. Sunday dinner at my parents' La Jolla villa was a non-negotiable ritual, a command performance where my attendance was logged more as a failure of my own life than a mark of familial duty. The heavy oak door swung open before I could use my key, the scent of expensive sea salt and citrus cleaner hitting me first, followed by the sight of my mother, Marla, already positioned in the entryway. "Harper, darling, you made it." Her voice had that slight, polished edge of disappointment, the one she reserved for my perpetually misaligned priorities. She air-kissed the space near my right cheek, her eyes doing a rapid, critical scan of my outfit. I wore dark, well-fitting denim, a simple silk shell, and flat loafers. It was practical. I'd spent the last 6 hours at the warehouse, our third-largest distribution center. Actually, personally overseeing the inventory count after a software glitch threatened our quarterly projections. My clothes were clean, expensive, and understated. But to Marla, they were a statement of defiance. They were not the flowing linen caftan she was wearing. "The traffic from Kearney Mesa was terrible. Mom, smells wonderful in here." I moved past her into the great room, a cavernous space of beige travertine and glass walls that overlooked the Pacific. The ocean was a deep, angry blue tonight, the sun having already dipped below the horizon, leaving a bruised purple stain in the sky. My father, Douglas, was exactly where I expected him to be, enthroned in his high-backed leather chair, a heavy crystal tumbler of whiskey in one hand. He grunted in acknowledgement. "Warehouse again?" "Just locking up, Dad." "She's here," he called out, not to me, but toward the terrace. My brother, Gavin, emerged, and the room's center of gravity shifted instantly. Gavin didn't just walk. He possessed spaces. He was wearing a salmon-colored cashmere sweater in the 68-degree air-conditioned chill of the house, his smile bright, predatory, and reflexive. He was my father's son, a managing partner at a mid-level equity fund that my father's connections had seeded. "Harper, glad you could grace us. We were just starting the celebration." Gavin clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was half greeting, half stabilizing himself. "What are we celebrating?" I asked, moving to the bar to pour myself a club soda. The lie about traffic had been thin. The truth was, I'd been in a 2-hour video conference with our new suppliers in Portugal, and before that, I'd been reviewing the heat map data from the website. My little shop, as they called it, had just passed a 9-figure valuation, a fact I kept as locked down as my server room. "Gavin's new fund, of course," Marla trilled, re-entering with a tray of appetizers. "He just closed a spectacular deal, something about logistics software." I froze, my hand on the bottle. "Really? Logistics?" "Oh, some nonsense. AI-driven supply chains." Gavin waved a dismissive hand, already bored. "Made a killing, but that's not the real news, is it, Dad?" Douglas's face, usually set in a mask of stern financial appraisal, cracked into what, for him, was a broad smile. "My boy's buying a house." Marla vibrated with excitement. "Not just a house, Harper, the house, the new build on Camino de la Costa. Douglas and I drove by it this morning. It's a work of art." "The model home, the one we pointed out last week?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. I knew the one. We all did. It was a 3-level monolith of glass, white stone, and cantilevered balconies, a monument to modern architecture that hung over the cliffs like a challenge to gravity. "That's the one," Gavin said, his voice dripping with casual ownership. "The developer owed my fund a favor. I've got the inside track. We're going to see it on Wednesday. Just to finalize." "Gavin," It's astounding, Marla said, placing a proprietary hand on his cashmere-covered arm. Tell Harper about the staircase. The staircase. Gavin leaned back, projecting to the room. It's a floating spiral structure, 3 stories of solid, tempered glass held by a central steel spine. The walls are all floor-to-ceiling glass, retractable. You can see the water from every room, even the master closet, and the wine cellar, subterranean, holds 5,000 bottles, with a tasting room built right into the bedrock. He was painting a picture, not of a home, but of a victory, a trophy. It's listed at $5.2 million, Douglas announced, his voice booming with pride. He took a long pull of his whiskey. Gavin's bank is already fast-tracking the credit line. There was a pause, a comfortable, self-satisfied silence as the 3 of them basked in the glow of this shared accomplishment. They were a perfect triangle of validation. My role was to be the audience, the dull gray backdrop against which their brilliance could shine. And in that moment, some small, tired wire in my brain snapped. I'm actually looking at houses, too, I said. The words dropped into the room like ice cubes on a hot skillet. They sizzled, smoked, and vanished. First came the silence, then the laughter. It wasn't a mean laugh. Not entirely. It was a laugh of genuine, affectionate disbelief. The kind you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. Marla put a hand to her mouth. A delicate titter. Gavin chuckled. A deep, amused sound. My father just scoffed. A short, sharp burst of air through his nose, and took another drink. Oh, sweetheart, Marla said, recovering first. That's nice. Are you finally thinking about a little condo? Maybe in North Park? Gavin could give you some advice. Couldn't you, Gavin, help your sister find a nice, cheap starter home? Of course, sis, Gavin smiled, all teeth. I've got a guy who handles low-income mortgages. I'm sure we can find a little studio you can afford, get you on the property ladder. The condescension was so thick I could barely breathe. I looked at my father. He wasn't laughing. He was looking at me with something bordering on pity, and it was that look that cut deeper than any laugh. He leaned forward, placing his glass on the coaster with absolute precision. His voice was low, not angry, but factual, like he was explaining a stock valuation. Harper, you will never own a house like your brother. He didn't say I couldn't. He said I wouldn't. It was a prophecy. It was a verdict. It was the defining thesis of our family dynamic. Spoken aloud for the first time, Gavin was the heir, the one who built wealth, the one who lived in glass houses. I was the hobbyist, the one who played with scented candles and throw pillows in a warehouse. I smiled. It was a small smile, one I had perfected over 32 years. It was the smile I used when a supplier tried to raise prices 20% overnight. It was the smile I used when a shipping container full of hand-blown glass from artisans in Poland arrived shattered. It was the smile that said, I hear you, and you have no idea what you're talking about, and thank you for underestimating me. I swallowed the anger. It tasted like old copper and bitter almonds, a flavor I knew well. Anyway, I said, turning my smile to my mother, this fish smells incredible. Mom, is that the fennel rub I like? The diversion worked. The tension broke. Marla, relieved to be back on the solid ground of her domestic expertise, launched into a detailed explanation of the halibut. The conversation flowed around me. Back to Gavin, back to his fund, back to the house. How is your little shop doing, dear? Marla asked as an afterthought, as she served the fish. Are you still selling those blankets? It's fine, Mom. We're busy. I kept my answer vague. I didn't mention the 70,000 square foot fulfillment center I just leased. I didn't mention the exclusive line with a major hotel chain. I didn't mention the nights I'd slept on a cot in my office, trying to debug the code for our new inventory management system. I didn't talk about the first loan I'd taken out, the one I'd secured not with family money, but with a business plan so airtight it made the bank manager weep. I didn't mention the first massive loss, when a whole shipment from Vietnam was held in customs for 6 months, rotting in the humidity, and I had to pay my employees out of my own savings. Those memories were mine alone. They were the engine I'd built in secret, while my family was busy polishing Gavin's trophies. Busy is good, Douglas said, cutting into his fish, but it's not a career. Harper, it's time you found a real job, something with a pension, security. You're not getting any younger. Maybe she could come work for you, Gav, Marla suggested brightly. She's good with numbers. Aren't you, dear? You could find a place for her in your office. I don't think my little shop skills would translate well to equity. Mom, I kept my voice light. Well, you have to think about the future, she insisted. You can't just play with crafts forever. Gavin, to his credit, just wanted to get back to the main topic. Anyway, the bank just needs my final P&L from the last 2 quarters. As soon as they approve the credit line, I'll put the offer in. By Friday, latest. He raised his glass. To new beginnings. To Gavin, my father toasted, his eyes shining. Gavin looked at me over the rim of his glass and then winked at my father. It was a tiny conspiratorial gesture, a signal of victory. The men of the house, closing a deal. I looked down at my plate. The halibut was perfectly cooked, flaky and white. I felt a sudden, cold calm settle over me. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, vibrating clarity. It was the same feeling I got right before I closed a major deal. The moment when all the variables align and the path forward becomes blindingly obvious. I picked up my phone, angling it under the table, away from my mother's line of sight. My fingers flew across the screen, my expression remaining one of placid interest in my mother's story about the neighbor's landscaping. I opened a secure message to Silas Reed, my COO, my partner in crime, the only other person on earth who knew the true scale of Arcadia and Loom. The message was 7 words. Urgent check on the $5.2 million La Jolla house. I hit send. I took a bite of fish. It was delicious. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m., the polished steel doors of the elevator slid open with a near-silent hiss. The air that greeted me wasn't the salt-tinged breeze of La Jolla, heavy with my family's judgment. It was the atmosphere I had built from scratch. It was the scent of Arcadia and Loom. My headquarters was not in a glittering high-rise with my name on it. My family thought I operated out of a dusty warehouse somewhere in an industrial park. The truth was, Arcadia and Loom occupied the top 3 floors of a meticulously restored brick and beam building in Miramar, a neighborhood they'd never visit. The aesthetic was my own. Light, wide plank oak floors, walls of exposed brick, painted a soft, matte white, and dividers of brushed steel and frosted glass. The air was warm, scented with our #1 bestseller, sandalwood and black pepper, a complex, smoky fragrance that was the olfactory equivalent of a 7-figure bank account. This was my real home. Silas Reed was already in my office, which we called the lab. He was standing, not sitting, looking at the city skyline, a dark espresso already waiting on my desk. Silas was my COO, the operational genius who turned my visions into logistical certainties. He wore a dark blue suit so perfectly tailored it looked like a piece of armor. He didn't waste time on pleasantries when we were in mission mode. "Good morning, Harper," he said. Turning, his face was, as always, professionally calm. He slid a single, laminated sheet across my desk. Not a heavy binder, just 1 page. "The quarterly projections?" I asked, sitting down. "The quarterly realities," he corrected. He pointed to the bottom line. "We implemented the new inventory AI 2 weeks early. It optimized the West Coast freight routes. As of this morning, our profit margin is up double digits, specifically 22% year over year, and our cash flow," he tapped the final number, "we have more than enough liquidity for a major cash acquisition, or several." I let the number sink in. It was a beautiful number, a number I had earned through sleepless nights, broken contracts, and a stubborn refusal to fail. "The message last night," Silas said, shifting from analyst to strategist. "The property on Camino de la Costa, $5.2 million. I assume this isn't a long-term investment property. It's a short-term tactical acquisition, I said, looking up from the report. I want it, Silas. I want to buy it. It's a glass monolith, overpriced for the square footage, and the developer is known for cutting corners on the structural engineering to pay for the aesthetic. He already had the full specs on his tablet. Of course he did. I don't care if it's made of paper mache. I want that house, and I want to buy it before my brother, Gavin, gets his bank financing approved. Silas allowed himself a very small, very brief smile. Ah, a family matter. A business matter, I corrected, though we both knew it was both. Here are the parameters. 1, we pay cash, the full $5.2 million. 2, my name, Harper Lang, appears on absolutely nothing, no paperwork, no deeds, no press. Arcadia and Loom is not involved. I want a new LLC, something sterile and anonymous, registered in Delaware, and I want it funded within 3 hours. Silas was already typing on his tablet. Understood. We'll call it Ocean Quill Holdings. It will be funded by a transfer from our holding company in Zurich, completely untraceable to you. Good, because this isn't for them, I said, half to myself. I stood up and walked to the wall of windows, looking down at the city. Do you remember our core principle, Silas? The one we agreed on when we were working out of that storage unit? He didn't hesitate. We do not brag. We do not posture. We do not ask for permission to be successful. We just are. Exactly. I turned back to him. They can laugh at my little shop. They can pat me on the head and tell me to find a real job. But they don't get to see the work. They don't get to see the sweat. They only get to see the result. And by the time they see it, it will be too late for them to have an opinion. My mind flashed back, a sharp, painful memory from 6 years ago. My first major supplier, a textile manufacturer in Italy, had taken my entire capital, every dollar I had, borrowed against my own apartment, and then simply disappeared. Folding his company and taking my money with him, I was ruined. I had gone to my father, not even for a loan, just for advice. He had looked at me with that same heavy pity from last night and said, "Well, Harper, this is what happens when you play business. Go back to Gavin. Maybe he can find you a spot in his mailroom." I didn't go to Gavin. I sold my car. I slept on a friend's couch. I spent 3 weeks tracking down a competing supplier in Portugal, and I used my last $500 to fly there and convince them to give me a line of credit based on nothing but my own projections. I learned my lesson. You don't ask for power, you build your own supply chain, and then you take it. Gavin is vulnerable, I said, the memory hardening my voice. He needs a bank. He needs approval. We don't. Silas's face was all business. Then we move. I've already sketched out a 72-hour roadmap. Our legal team at Rowe and Alder is on standby to create the LLC. The bank is ready to wire the funds for proof of liquidity. I have a structural engineering firm, the best in Southern California, ready to do a full inspection, discreetly, this afternoon. We'll have thermal imaging and moisture readings on that entire house before Gavin even has his suit picked out for his viewing. We'll also have a mobile notary on call, 24/7. Make it happen, I said. Silas paused, his finger hovering over his tablet. There is one more thing, a complication, or perhaps an advantage. What is it? The listing agent for the property. It's Lydia Cortez. The name hit me. Lydia Cortez. A decade ago. Cortez Properties had been a major player in San Diego commercial real estate. My father, Douglas, and his partners at the time had identified her fund as a target. They initiated a hostile takeover, a brutal campaign that forced her to liquidate her entire portfolio at pennies on the dollar to avoid bankruptcy. My father had boasted about it at dinner for a month. He'd broken her. Lydia Cortez, I repeated, the name tasting like iron. The gatekeeper. She has a fiduciary duty to her seller, which is the developer, Silas said. But she has absolutely no love for the Lang family. My father's actions didn't just cost her money, They cost her the company her own father had built. A cold, clear path began to form in my mind. She has a seller who wants a clean deal. She has Gavin Lang, the son of the man who ruined her, coming in with a contingent offer based on bank financing, and now she will have Ocean Quill Holdings, an anonymous entity, offering all cash, no contingencies. She has every personal and professional reason to bury Gavin's offer at the bottom of the pile and fast-track ours. Silas finished. A cash offer is king. A cash offer from an enemy of her enemy? That's a coronation. He checked his notes again. We also have some internal intel. My contact at Gavin's preferred bank says his loan committee is dragging its feet. They want more paperwork on his fund's performance. His viewing on Wednesday isn't a formality. It's a show the client's serious move. He doesn't have the approval yet. He won't get it in time, I said. Okay, what are our options for the close? I want this done. Silas laid out two paths. Option A, we go in hard and fast, full cash offer, close in 24 hours. We could have the keys in your hand by tomorrow afternoon. It's aggressive, and it would shock them. Option B? Option B is more strategic, he said, and I knew this was the one he preferred. We still offer all cash, non-contingent, but we request a standard 8-day close. It still makes us the most attractive offer by a mile, but it gives us a crucial window. A window for what? Pre-closing access. That house is a glass box. Harper, it's an architectural statement, not a fortress. The security is non-existent. An 8-day close gives us time to get our own security team in there. Under the guise of inspectors, we can install the framework for our system. Biometric scanners, hidden sensors, reinforced data lines. Before you ever spend a night there, we build the fortress inside the glass box. I considered it. The shock and awe of a 24-hour close was tempting, but the cold, calculated precision of the 8-day plan, that was my style. That was Arcadia and Loom. We do option B, I decided. I want this locked down. I want the security in place. I looked back at the city. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a narrative. My family had written one for me. The quiet, artsy daughter who ran a cute little business, the failure, the footnote to Gavin's success. This purchase wasn't a rebuttal. It was an edit. Secrecy is paramount, Silas, I said, my voice quiet but firm. No one finds out, not my family, not the press. I don't want to give them the chance to spin this. I want the moment of revelation to be a simple, undeniable fact. I want it to be a double-edged sword, one that cuts away every single prejudice they've ever held about me, all at once. Silas closed his tablet. Consider it done. I'll reach out to Lydia Cortez. I suspect she'll be very, very happy to take my call. The machine of my true life, the one I had built in the sterile quiet of boardrooms and the echoing concrete of warehouses, engaged with a formidable, satisfying click. While my family was still digesting their Sunday halibut, my world was operating at the speed of capital. At 8:01 a.m. on Monday, an encrypted email arrived in my inbox. Subject: OQH. It was from our legal counsel at Rowe and Alder. Ocean Quill Holdings, LLC, was now a fully formed, legally registered entity in the state of Delaware. Its articles of incorporation were deliberately vague, listing its purpose as management of various assets. By 8:30 a.m., our primary corporate bank, a discreet Swiss institution with a branch in New York, had received a digitally signed authorization from me. They executed a wire transfer, moving $10 million from the Arcadia and Loom reserve account, a fund my family didn't even know existed, into a new, sterile business account under the name Ocean Quill Holdings. At 8:45 a.m., my secure line buzzed. It was Silas. The letter of balance is generated, he said, his voice crisp. A notarized, bank-certified document stating that Ocean Quill Holdings possesses a liquid cash balance in the high seven figures, available for immediate, unencumbered transfer, no mortgage, no financing, no liens. And the inspection team? I asked, looking at a new textile sample on my desk without really seeing it. On standby. They are a forensic structural engineering firm, not a simple home inspector. They bring thermal cameras, humidity gauging instruments, and a sound mapping device. They can tell us if the foundation concrete is solid or if it's full of air bubbles. They are ready to deploy the moment we get a window. Good. Now, what about the gatekeeper? There was a slight pause. I am contacting Lydia Cortez in precisely 3 minutes, Silas said. Her public office line opens at 9. I wanted all our assets in place before I made the first move. The letter of balance is already in her inbox, sent from a generic acquisitions email address at Ocean Quill. She'll be curious, I said. Curiosity is the first step to a negotiation. I'll call you back. He hung up. I sat in the silence. This was the part of the business I loved. The clean, cold mechanics of power. It wasn't about shouting or making demands. It was about placing a set of undeniable facts on the table so that the other party had only one logical path to follow. My path. 20 minutes later, my line buzzed again. That was fast, I said, picking up. Ms. Cortez is efficient, Silas replied. His voice was different, taut, energized. The call was illuminating. She opened with the standard professional chill. I've received your client's letter. What is the offer? She didn't acknowledge the bank, the cash, nothing. And you? I told her our client was prepared to offer the full asking price, $5.2 million, all cash. Her reaction? Silence, a long one. Then she said, all cash offers are welcome. Send me the paperwork. She was testing me. She was waiting to see if I was just another broker. But you're not, I said. No, I told her. Ms. Cortez, my principal is not interested in a paper shuffling contest. My principal is interested in a transaction. We are prepared to offer the full $5.2 million, with no appraisal contingency and no inspection contingency. We can close in 7 days. I smiled. No inspection contingency. That's a high-stakes play. Silas. It's a calculated one. I told her we had our own independent structural team, and we would need a 4-hour window for a walkthrough before signing. I didn't lie. She read between the lines instantly. She knew our walkthrough was the inspection. By waiving the contingency, we were telling her that we were taking the risk on ourselves, which makes our offer ironclad. The seller has no fear of us backing out over a leaky pipe. And what did she say? She said, 7 days is fast. My client will like that. Silas took a breath. And then, the mask came off. Her voice changed. It got very low, very personal. She said, Mr. Reed, I don't know who your principal is, but I know that name, Lang. I see your principal's last name is not on this LLC, but I saw another inquiry this morning from a Gavin Lang. He needs a bridge loan. She confirmed it, I whispered. She did more than that, Silas said, his voice dropping. She gave me the strategy. She said, your anonymous principal has cash. The other party has a bank. Banks have committees. Committees have delays. If you want this house, don't give his bank time to meet. She's the one who suggested the 7-day close. She's actively routing for us. Harper, she wants this to happen. A cold thrill ran through me. This was better than I'd hoped. We didn't just have a willing agent. We had an ally. Okay, Silas. She gave us the plan. Let's make it better. I want a rider in that offer. A rider? You want to add a contingency? His voice was sharp with concern. Not a contingency, a condition of access. I'm not comfortable with that house. You were right. It's a glass box. I want our security team to have pre-closing access, not just the inspectors. I mean, our team. That's a huge ask. Harper, the seller still owns it. They won't let us drill into walls and run wires on a house we haven't paid for yet. We won't. I want them to install the brains of the system. Hidden sensors, waterproofing sensors for that ridiculous subterranean wine cellar, new code for the smart home hub. It's all software and small component installation. No heavy drilling. Frame it as a specialized technology assessment. Tell them our principal is a high-profile individual who requires absolute electronic privacy. Make it about security, not structural changes. That will be a fight, he said. Then fight it, I replied. And make sure the anonymity clause is airtight. I want it legally stipulated that Lydia and the seller cannot disclose the identity of the beneficial owner of Ocean Quill Holdings to any third party, especially other interested buyers, until the deed is recorded and the title is transferred. I want Gavin to walk up to that house on Wednesday for his viewing and be told by an agent that the house is already in escrow. Understood. I'll have Rowe and Alder draft the rider and the non-disclosure agreement immediately. I'll send it all to Lydia within the hour. He hung up. The rest of the day was a blur of operations. While one part of my brain was approving budgets for our new spring catalog, the other was in a high-stakes negotiation. At 2:17 p.m., Silas forwarded me the report from the inspection team. Lydia had gotten them their 4-hour window. The news was, as Silas had predicted, not great. The report was clinical, brutal. Significant thermal anomalies detected in subterranean concrete, consistent with water seepage. HVAC system under-spec'd for square footage by 30%. Smart home security system is a consumer-grade product with known vulnerabilities. I sent it back to Silas with one word: perfect. This confirmed my need for the security rider. At 4 p.m., the real bomb dropped. Silas walked into my office. He didn't call. He just appeared, which meant the news was bad. The seller is hesitating, he said, no preamble. He has a $5 million all-cash offer closing in 7 days. What is there to hesitate about? He has a letter, Silas said, looking at his tablet. Lydia just forwarded it. It's a letter of personal interest from the other party, from Gavin. Let me guess, I said, leaning back in my chair. He talked about family and roots and building a life in that house. Silas raised an eyebrow. You're close. He's a young fund manager, just like his father, looking to plant deep roots in the La Jolla community. He's appealing to the seller's ego, and he mentioned he's just waiting on a simple bridge loan to make a formal offer. A bridge loan, I scoffed. That's what you call it when the bank won't give you a real mortgage. He's clumsy. He's clumsy, but he's sentimental, Silas countered. And the seller is eating it up. The seller is an old-school property developer. He likes the idea of passing his masterpiece on to a young lion of finance. He's getting cold feet about our anonymous, sterile LLC. He's worried we're just some foreign corporation that's going to flip it. This was a problem my money couldn't solve. This was an emotional variable. Find out about the seller, I said. Right now, I want to know everything about him, what he eats, where he vacations, what his hobbies are. Find me an emotional knife to counter Gavin's. Silas was already gone. For an hour. I did nothing but stare at the sales projections. My mind racing. Gavin, for all his bluster, was using the one tool I refused to, the family name, the legacy. He was appealing to the club. At 5:15 p.m., Silas returned. He had a single sheet of paper. The seller's name is Martin Sandoval, Silas said. Self-made man. Built his company from nothing. He has one daughter. Her name is Elena. She just applied for early admission to the new School of Architecture and Design, right here in San Diego. It's her dream school, and it's notoriously expensive. The world snapped into focus. Rowe and Alder, I said, picking up my phone. Get them on the line. Harper, what are you? It's not a bribe. Silas, it's a gift, a non-material consideration. I was already talking to the lawyer. David, I need an addendum to the Ocean Quill offer, right now. I want to establish a scholarship, a 5-year, fully funded design and architecture grant at the new school, to be awarded to a promising local female student, chosen by the faculty. I want to name it, I don't know, the Camino de la Costa grant. Get the school on the phone. Make it happen. I want the confirmation letter of the grant's establishment sent to Lydia Cortez tonight. We're not offering it to the seller. We're just informing him that our philanthropic LLC is funding it, as part of our commitment to the community we're investing in. Silas's eyes widened. He finally understood. It was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. We weren't buying the seller's favor, we were just showing him, in concrete terms, that our sterile LLC had more class, more substance, and more goodwill than a young lion with a bridge loan. We were funding his daughter's dream, indirectly, and making him feel noble for accepting our offer. At 7:43 p.m., Lydia Cortez called Silas. He patched her through to my office speaker. "Mr. Reed," she said, and her voice was full of something I could only describe as awe. "I have never, in my 30-year career, seen a move like this. The letter about the scholarship, Martin Sandoval, the seller, he was crying. We are very committed to supporting local design," Silas said smoothly. "I'm sure you are," she said, the smile evident in her voice. "He's soft, he's moved, but he's a businessman. He gave me one condition. He's embarrassed that Gavin Lang's offer is stuck in finance. He's insulted by it. He wants to know our offer is real. He promises priority. He'll sign our offer tonight and reject all others. If he sees the earnest money deposit in his escrow account within 24 hours. "How much?" I mouthed to Silas. Silas asked. 10%, Lydia answered. $520,000, not a check, a wire. He wants to see the money before the banks open on Wednesday. "Harper," Silas said, turning to me. I didn't hesitate. I was already at my computer, logging into the Ocean Quill bank account. "Tell her the wire transfer will be initiated in the next 5 minutes. I'm signing the authorization for the deposit right now." I found the offer package our lawyers had prepared. I clicked the sign button on the digital document, authorizing the transfer, agreeing to the 7-day close, the security rider, the anonymity clause, and the scholarship addendum. "It's done," I said, my voice steady. "Lydia," Silas said into the phone, "the wire is in motion. You will have confirmation from the bank in the morning." "I'll prepare the acceptance for his signature," Lydia said, and I could hear the click of her keyboard. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. Your principal just bought a house." After the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I made one more call. "Silas," I said, when he picked up, "the security team. The 8-day window is too long. The seller is emotional. I want them in, now. Harper, we don't own the house yet. We're not in contract until he signs." "He will sign," I said. "He has the scholarship. He has the money. He will sign tonight. I want our team on site at dawn. He gave us a technology assessment window. Let's use it. I want a master locksmith and the biometric security team at that house at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Tell them to be discreet. Tell them to look like electricians. A 6 a.m. mobilization is aggressive." Aggressive wins. Silas, get it done. I hung up. The game was no longer about money. It was about speed, and I was already moving faster than my brother could even dream. The day was a Tuesday. It was the 7th, and final, day of our closing window. My phone buzzed on the dark walnut of my desk. It was an alert, not from my team, but from a private financial media network I monitored. It was Gavin. He had posted a photograph. He was standing in front of the massive, 12-foot glass pivot door of the house on Camino de la Costa. He was wearing his Master of the Universe suit, one arm leaning casually against the stone facade, his smile blinding. The caption read, "Measuring the drapes, big things coming soon, Mr. Delaney, La Jolla, Mr. Delaney, Real Estate, Mr. Delaney, Legacy." He hadn't tagged my father or mother. This was for his world. This was a boast to his investors, his rivals, his peers. He was claiming a victory he had not yet secured. I looked at the picture for a long, quiet moment. I saw the cheap, builder-grade smart lock on the door, the one our security team had already flagged as vulnerable. I saw the reflection of the landscaping, which our inspectors noted had a drainage problem. And I saw my brother, a man so convinced of his own narrative that he was posing for pictures in front of a house he would never, ever be allowed to enter. I didn't like the post. I didn't forward it. I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, deep, and sudden focus. I closed the app, put my phone face down on the desk, and picked up the last stack of papers from our legal counsel. It was the final closing authorization for Ocean Quill Holdings. It was a stack of corporate resolutions, tax declarations, and identity verifications, all meticulously prepared by Rowe and Alder to shield my name from the public record. I signed the last page, my signature a sharp, deliberate stroke of black ink. I scanned it and sent it to our corporate bank, copying Silas. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. My secure line rang at exactly 2:45. It was Lydia Cortez. Her voice was not the smooth, allied tone from our previous calls. It was strained, sharp, and fast. "Harper, are you with your finance team?" she asked, dispensing with pleasantries. "I am. What's happened?" "Martin Sandoval, the seller. He's a nervous wreck. Gavin's broker has been blowing up his phone all morning, begging him to stall, promising a full-price offer with a significant over-ask by tomorrow. He's telling Sandoval that your LLC is a shell company, that the money isn't real, that it's a scam to lock him into a contract and then try to renegotiate." "He's projecting," I said, my voice cold. "It doesn't matter what he is. He's spooking the seller. Sandoval is a good man. He's honoring our contract. He signed the final closing documents this morning, but his escrow agent, the one holding the money, is now terrified of being sued by all sides. He's demanding a complete, fully funded wire of the entire remaining balance, not just the deposit, the full $5.2 million. He wants to see the entire cash amount, cleared, in his escrow account, or he will not release the deed. He's given us a deadline." "What is it?" 4 p.m., she said. "His bank's wire cut off for same-day recording. He wants the money in his account, confirmed, by 4 o'clock. If it's not there, he's threatening to declare our side in breach of the funding clause. It's ridiculous. It's not legal. But it will throw this whole thing into a legal mess that could last for months. He's scared. He wants this over, and he wants to see the money. 1 hour and 15 minutes. To move millions of dollars across international banking systems." I looked at Silas, who had been listening on mute. He simply nodded. He was already at his own terminal. "Lydia," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I am logging into the Ocean Quill banking portal right now. My accounting head is on standby, and so is our banker. You're not going to wait until 4 p.m. You're going to get it now." I didn't shout. I didn't rush. I executed. My fingers moved across the keyboard, through 3 layers of security protocols. The 2-factor authentication key on my desk lit up. I entered the code. The wire transfer screen appeared. Amount: $4,680,000. The balance remaining after our 10% deposit. To the Escrow and Title Company of La Jolla. I clicked the final authorization button. The wire is initiated. Lydia, the funds have left my account. "Initiated isn't confirmed," she said, the stress still in her voice. "We need them to see it." "They will," I said. "Thank you for the alert." I hung up. Now we waited. This was the part no one ever saw. The agonizing silence between send and received. A single compliance officer at a clearinghouse, taking a long lunch, a server flag. Anything could delay it. Silas and I sat in silence in the lab. The only sound was the quiet hum of our servers and the distant traffic. 3:02 p.m. 3:07 p.m. At 3:12 p.m., my laptop pinged with an email. It wasn't from Lydia. It was a sterile, automated receipt from the title company's banking portal. Subject: Wire confirmation, OQ8. Body: We confirm receipt of funds in the full. Agreed upon amount at 15:12 Pacific Standard Time. I exhaled. One clean breath. "Funds are in," I said to Silas. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. "I'll call the security team. They are still on site, finishing the sensor calibration. I'll tell them to move to the final phase." At 3:25 p.m., another email. This one was from Lydia. The subject line was just a single word: done. The body of the email was simple. The escrow agent confirmed the funds. Martin Sandoval's attorney authorized the release. The deed was electronically recorded with the county clerk at 3:25 p.m. The house is yours. Congratulations. Attached was a PDF, the final, recorded deed. Ocean Quill Holdings, LLC, was now the legal and sole owner of the property at Camino de la Costa. I was staring at the digital file when my personal phone, the one my family had the number for, buzzed. It was a text from Lydia, a new one, to my personal number. It came in at 3:41 p.m. "You are not going to believe this," she wrote. "Gavin Lang's broker just called my office. Frantic. He was screaming at my assistant. 'Where is Lydia? I have an offer.' My assistant told him I was in a meeting. He hung up. 5 minutes later, an associate of mine at the bank called. He told me Gavin Lang was on the phone with his father at exactly 3:41 p.m., boasting that the bank had finally approved his creative financing and he was going to be making his knockout offer tomorrow morning. He's celebrating right now. Harper, he has no idea." I read the text. He was celebrating a loan approval for a house that I had already paid for, in cash, 20 minutes earlier. At 4:05 p.m., another text from Lydia. "I just changed the status in the MLS from pending to sold. The entire San Diego real estate network got the notification. His broker knows. It's over." The official victory, the public, undeniable fact. My computer pinged again, a message from Silas. This one on our internal. Secure chat. It was a photograph. It wasn't a picture of the house. It was a close-up of the front door. But the cheap, builder-grade lock was gone. In its place was a sleek, black biometric scanner and keypad, flush-mounted into the stone. The text from the security team lead read, "System active. All previous codes, including builder and agent codes, have been purged. Temporary access for principal is set. The house is secure." It was 4:20 p.m. I looked at the photo of the new lock. He was locked out, in every way a person could be. Then Lydia's final text came through, the one that explained everything. "I have to be professional on my work phone," she wrote. "But I need to tell you this personally. 10 years ago, your father cornered me. He put me in a deposition and used my own company's debts to force me to liquidate my father's entire legacy. He called it a smart play. He ruined me. Today, I just sat here and watched the son, who he thinks is a genius, try to get a bridge loan for a house his daughter just bought with cash, in an afternoon, like she was buying groceries. Your father once cornered me. Today, I paid that debt by giving you speed. Enjoy the house. Harper." That night, I didn't go home to my apartment. I drove to La Jolla. I parked 3 streets away and walked to the house, the ocean air cold and sharp. I stood in front of the new, dark lock. I entered the temporary code Silas had sent me. The heavy glass door hissed open with a hydraulic sigh. I stepped inside. The house was cavernous, dark, and silent. It smelled of new paint, concrete, and the faint, clean scent of the ocean. The power was on, and the ambient light from the floating staircase cast long, geometric shadows on the travertine floors. I walked through the empty rooms. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass wall, watching the waves crash on the rocks below. I touched the cool, solid rail of the glass staircase. My family expected me to be small. My father's words from Sunday echoed in my head. "You will never own a house like your brother." I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel the need to call my father and tell him he was wrong. The anger, the years of frustration, the constant, grinding need to be seen. It all just evaporated. It drained out of me, leaving behind a profound and absolute stillness. I wasn't the audience to their lives anymore. I was the house. I looked at my phone. I could send the picture of the deed. I could post my own photo. I put the phone back in my pocket. The truth, I decided, was a weapon. And it shouldn't be wasted in a text message. It should be saved. It needed to be unveiled. Not just told. It deserved the right time and the right place. I would let them have their evening. I would let Gavin have one last night of celebrating his imaginary victory. Because I owned the stage now. and I would decide when the play began. For 2 weeks, the house on Camino de la Costa was a fortress. Now, it was time to turn it into a theater. The day after the deed was recorded, my security team completed their installation, and the furnishing began. The house was a magnificent, empty glass box. I intended to fill it with the one thing my family had never acknowledged: my work, my success, my taste. I stood in the center of the empty great room with Silas, the echo of the ocean outside the only sound. "The security network is fully integrated and invisible," he said, his voice quiet. "The staff has been hired, a small, discreet team, all of an age to be uninteresting, all vetted, all signed to ironclad non-disclosure agreements. The house is secure. What is the next move?" "We're going to throw a party," I said. Silas, for the first time in our professional relationship, looked genuinely surprised. "A party? You hate parties." "I hate parties where I'm expected to be wallpaper. This is different." I turned to him. "This isn't a celebration. Silas, it's a product launch, and the product is me." The plan was simple, and in its simplicity, it was complex. We would host a housewarming party, but the host would remain anonymous. We would build a mystery. "The invitation," I said, walking toward the glass wall. "It needs to be a specific kind of statement." 2 days later, Silas placed a prototype in my hand. It was a heavy, 8-ply card of creamy, undyed cotton stock. There was no ink, there were no graphics, there was only a minimalist, sans serif font, deeply embossed into the paper. You had to feel it to read it. It read, "You are invited to the unveiling, the house on the coast, Saturday, November 20th, 7 in the evening. The address, cocktails and hors d'oeuvres." There was no host listed, no RSVP email, only a small, elegant QR code on the back that led to a temporary, unbranded website where guests could confirm their attendance. The guest list was my primary focus. It was a strategic document. "We will have 3 categories," I instructed Silas. "Category 1, the validation. That's the architecture and design press, the editors of Architectural Digest, Dezeen, and the Los Angeles Times home section, the most respected architects in Southern California. Category 2, the context," I continued. "Local power, the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, the old guard business leaders from La Jolla and downtown San Diego, the people my father and brother consider their peers, their audience." Silas looked up from his tablet. "And Category 3? "Category 3, I said, "is the target. The family. Douglas, Marla, and Gavin Lang," I confirmed. "Send theirs by courier, just like everyone else." "Harper," Silas said, pausing. "Are you sure? It complicates the narrative." "It's the reason for the narrative. Silas, they are the primary audience. Everyone else is just the set dressing." The next 10 days were a logistical masterpiece, while the invitations went out, creating a wave of quiet, confused speculation across the city. My design team descended on the house. This was the most critical part. "I want the house furnished," I told my head stylist, a woman with a genius eye for natural placement. "I want it to look like it's been lived in for 6 months by someone with impeccable, understated taste. I want pieces from the Arcadia and Loom spring collection on every natural line of sight." "The new ceramic vases?" she asked. "The Aurora line, on the mantels, the hand-blown tumblers from the Portuguese line at the bar, the cashmere throws from the Scottish mill on the sofas. I don't want it to look like a catalog. I want it to look like a home. When that editor from Architectural Digest picks up a glass, I want her to feel the quality before she even knows what it is." "And the art?" "We lease it, major contemporary pieces, nothing my parents would recognize, muted, textural, and expensive. We worked in secret, under the cover of finishing construction. The house's transformation was absolute. It went from a cold glass box to a warm, sophisticated sanctuary that smelled of brushed steel, oiled walnut, and the custom scent of sandalwood and black pepper that now flowed through the smart home HVAC system. The buzz in the city was palpable. Who had bought the $5 million house? Who was this anonymous host? The call I was waiting for came 3 days before the party. My personal phone. My mother. "Harper, darling." Her voice was a trill of social anxiety and excitement. "Thank goodness you answered. Are you going?" I sat down at my desk at the Arcadia and Loom headquarters, leaned back in my chair, and looked at the city skyline. "Going where, Mom?" "To the party, of course," she said, as if I were insane. "The one at the new glass house, Camino de la Costa. Everyone is talking about it. Douglas and I received the most peculiar invitation, just embossed. So strange. No host name." "That is odd," I said, my voice a perfect, flat, neutral tone. "I am certain it's one of Gavis's new partners," she gushed, answering her own question. "He's been working with that new software billionaire, the one who just moved from the Bay Area. It must be him. This is his style. So secretive, so powerful. Oh, I hope Gavin is right. This would be a huge connection for him." "I'm sure it would be," I said. "Well, that's why I'm calling," she insisted. "You received an invitation too, didn't you?" "Yes, I did." "Good. You absolutely must go. You need to be seen in these places. Harper, it's how you learn. It's how you network. You need to see how successful people live, what their homes are like. You've been so focused on your little warehouse. It's time you saw what the real world looks like." The irony was so thick, so heavy. It was almost a physical weight. I would go. I would go to my own house, on my mother's orders, to learn how I live. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "I shouldn't miss it. I'll be there." "Wonderful," she breathed, relieved. "Wear something. Nice. Something sophisticated. Try not to look like you're going to check inventory. Oh, this will be so good for Gavin." I hung up the phone and stared at my hand. It was perfectly steady. The first crisis hit, as it always does, from the old guard. Silas walked into my office 48 hours before the event, his face tight. "We have a problem," he said. "The La Jolla Residents Association." "What about them?" "They're citing a neighborhood covenant from 1948 regarding event parking. They're threatening to block the street and have every car towed. The association president? He's a close personal friend of your father." "Of course he is," I said. "They're not threatening us because of parking. Silas, they're testing us. The old money is rattling its cage, trying to see who the new owner is. They've already called the city. They're trying to get our event permit pulled." "Fine," I said. "They want to play by the rules? We'll play by rules they don't even know exist." I picked up my phone. "Get me the director of the Coastal Conservancy Fund, the one we've been vetting for our new corporate philanthropy program." Silas's solution was brilliant. By 6 p.m. that evening, our event was no longer a private party. It was now a benefactor's reception and fundraiser for the La Jolla Coastal Conservancy. We had made an executive donation that morning, a donation large enough to get the director's personal attention. "We are no longer subject to the neighborhood covenant," Silas reported, a rare, thin smile on his lips. "We are now a philanthropic event. I have secured a temporary permit from the city, under the Conservancy's banner. We've leased a private parking garage 2 miles away, and we are running a fleet of 8 silent electric shuttles to ferry the guests. The Residents Association can't touch us, and as a bonus, the donation is a full tax write-off for Ocean Quill Holdings." Good. They built a wall, so we built a door. The final piece of the puzzle, as always, was Gavin. On the Friday before the party, Silas forwarded me an email. It was a link to the San Diego Business Journal online, a small, insignificant fluff piece in their weekly real estate column. The headline was, "Camino de la Costa Jewel sells to mystery buyer. Local prospects emerge." The article detailed the sale of the house, noting the anonymity of the LLC, but the last paragraph was the prize. It quoted an anonymous source close to the financial world, who stated that Young local fund managers like Gavin Lang of Lang Capital were driving the new luxury market. It hinted that Lang himself was eyeing several prospects in the area, and that the mystery buyer was likely a partner in his new venture. Gavin, he couldn't help himself. He couldn't stand not being the center of the story. So he had inserted himself into it. He was trying to pressure a ghost, to claim association with a victory that wasn't his. I smiled. He's still trying to impress the seller, I said. He has no idea the seller is gone. This is a narrative challenge. Harper, he's trying to co-opt your story. No, I said, closing the laptop. He's just writing fan fiction. I picked up my phone. Silas, get me that editor from Dezeen, the one who wanted the exclusive on our sustainable supply chain. Tell her I'm ready for that interview. My story went live 12 hours later. It wasn't about me. It was about the work. It was a deep dive into how Arcadia and Loom was creating a fully transparent supply chain with Portuguese artisans. The headline was, Sustainable Luxury, the New Face of Home Design. My name was mentioned only once, deep in the article, as founder and chief visionary. Gavin had planted a seed of rumor. I had planted a tree of fact. The night of the party, the house was perfect. The caterers were in place. The valets for the electric shuttles were standing by. The lighting was low and warm. The Arcadia and Loom pieces looked like they had been born in the rooms they occupied. I stood in the master suite, looking at my final preparation. Silas, I said, speaking to the empty room. I knew he was monitoring the security feed from his command center, a discreet van parked 3 blocks away. His voice came through a tiny, invisible earpiece. I'm here. Harper, all systems are green. The security system, I said. I want every camera active, full audio and video recording for every public space, every interaction. I want a complete record. It's already running, he confirmed. We are capturing every angle. Good. I turned to the mirror. My dress was not a statement. It was the absence of one. It was a simple, floor-length sheath of black silk. No jewelry, save for tiny, simple diamond studs. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. I was not a guest. I was not a host. I was the architect of the entire evening. I was wearing my armor. It was silent. It was black. And it was ready. I walked down the floating glass staircase, the city lights glittering behind me like a kingdom I had just conquered. The first shuttle was arriving. It's time, Silas, I said, picking up a champagne flute. Showtime, his voice replied. I took a sip and turned to the door as the first guests, eyes wide with wonder, stepped inside. The party began as a low murmur, a tide of polite curiosity washing into the house. The electric shuttles delivered their cargo of San Diego's elite in quiet, steady waves. I stood near the bar, holding a flute of champagne I had no intention of drinking, and simply watched. The house performed its duty perfectly. The floating glass staircase was the immediate star. Guests pausing at the entryway to look up, their reflections caught in the massive glass walls that framed the dark ocean. My God, who is this person? I heard a woman in a sequined jacket whisper to her husband. The art alone, that's a Gerhard Richter. That's not just money, that's taste. The piece in question was, in fact, a leased print, but a brilliant one. The effect was the same. The whispers were my first line of offense. Who? The question echoed in every conversation. People speculated it was a tech billionaire from San Francisco, a foreign prince, or a Hollywood director. Not one person suggested it was someone they already knew. Not one person suggested it was me. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in my own home. My black dress allowed me to blend into the shadows. I listened. I heard the editor from Dezeen admiring the brushed steel joinery. I heard a prominent local developer complaining to his wife that he'd tried to buy this lot for years. I heard admiration. I heard envy. It was a symphony of validation, and no one knew they were playing for me. Then, at 7:45, the center of my old universe arrived. My mother, Marla, entered first, clutching her beaded purse. Her eyes were wide, taking in the scale of the room, the sheer number of important faces. She was in her element, proximity to power. My father, Douglas, followed, his expression more measured. He was calculating. He was assessing the value of the asset, trying to place the owner on the social and financial ledger in his mind. A server, one of my vetted team, approached them with a tray of champagne. "Oh, marvelous," Marla said. Taking a glass, she paused by a large, matte white ceramic vessel from my Aurora line, a piece I had agonized over for 6 months to get the glaze right. She ran a hand over its smooth, cool surface. "Douglas, look at this. What an unusual piece. So substantial. It must be some new artist from Scandinavia." "It's nice," Douglas conceded, his gaze fixed on the crowd, already searching for familiar faces to network with. And then, Gavin. He didn't just arrive. He made an entrance. He was with a man I didn't recognize, someone with the same slick, predatory smile, clearly a partner from his fund. Gavin was loud. His voice was pitched to carry, to be overheard. "It's exactly as I told you," Gavin was saying, gesturing broadly at the room, as if he were already the host. "The bones are good, a little sterile, but the valuation is solid. An asset like this, you have to appreciate it as part of a personal portfolio. It's not just a home, it's a statement." He was treating my house like an open for inspection, positioning himself as the expert, the one who understood this world. He was reinforcing the lie he'd planted in the business journal. My family, all 3 of them, were now in the room. They didn't see me, or rather, they looked through me. I was just another guest in a black dress, a face in the crowd. They gravitated toward the center of the room, where the most prominent people were gathered. I continued my slow, deliberate path, circling the perimeter. I was in a bubble of my own making, a cone of silence. I heard a voice, sharp and intelligent, cut through the general hum. "Well, I know who made these." It was the editor from Architectural Digest, a woman named Eleanor Vance. She was standing with the editor from Dezeen, right in front of the main fireplace, where a curated collection of 3 Aurora vases sat. Eleanor had a sharp, critical eye that I respected. She was holding one of the smaller, dove-gray vases. "This is from the Arcadia and Loom Aurora line. It's their new spring collection. I'd know that glaze anywhere. I just saw the lookbook last week." "Arcadia and Loom?" the other editor said. "The sustainable sourcing company? I thought they just did textiles." "They're moving into ceramics, and it's brilliant," Eleanor said, her voice full of authority. "Whoever the host is, they have a fantastic eye. This is the most interesting work happening in home goods right now." My heart, for a moment, beat faster. This was real. This was unsolicited, professional validation, from the highest source. Gavin, who was standing nearby, overheard them. He had been holding court with his partner, but this critique of the decor had drawn his attention. He turned, a condescending smile fixed on his face, and sauntered over. "You're admiring the pottery?" he asked, his tone indulgent. Eleanor Vance, recognizing him from the financial pages, nodded politely. "I was just saying, this is a piece from Arcadia and Loom. It's quite good." Gavin laughed, a short, sharp, barking laugh. He didn't even look at the vase. He looked at Eleanor. "Arcadia and Loom?" he scoffed, picking up a glass of whiskey from a passing tray. "That's my sister's little craft project. Cute, right? She sells that stuff online, mostly to housewives in Ohio." He turned to the vase, his expression one of pure disdain. "This is probably just a good knockoff," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "The real owner of this house wouldn't be decorating with my sister's hobby. They'd have the real thing, Italian, probably." He said it directly to Eleanor Vance. He said it to the most powerful editor in the design world. He had just called my work a knockoff of itself. He had dismissed my entire empire as a hobby. He had no idea. The blood drained from my face, then returned in a hot, clarifying rush. The Dezeen editor, who had just read my article on sustainable sourcing, looked at Gavin, then at Eleanor, her face a mask of confusion. Eleanor herself just raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her expression unreadable. Across the room, I saw Silas. He was standing near the staircase, dressed as a guest, his earpiece in. He had seen the interaction. He had seen my face. He met my gaze. I gave him a single, sharp, almost imperceptible nod. This was it. The trigger. The moment. The script was now locked. Silas, in one smooth motion, took a small metal spoon from a passing tray and tapped it firmly against his champagne glass. Ting, ting, ting. The sound was sharp, clear, and cut through the conversational hum. The room, slowly at first, then all at once, fell silent. 200 pairs of eyes, belonging to the most powerful people in the city, turned toward the sound, expecting the anonymous host to finally reveal themselves. My family turned too. Marla looked expectant, her smile bright, ready to applaud Gavin's friend. Douglas looked analytical, ready to appraise the owner. Gavin looked smug, as if he had willed this moment to happen, as if he were about to be announced as a partner. Silas, his role played, faded back into the crowd. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2. I moved from the shadows. I walked to the foot of the floating staircase. I placed my hand on the cool, stainless steel railing. I did not raise my voice. I did not shout. I just spoke into the perfect, expectant silence. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and amplified by the room's perfect, hard-surfaced acoustics. Everyone turned. I saw the moment of recognition in their eyes, the confusion. They saw me. Harper Lang, the quiet daughter, the one in the black dress, the wallpaper. "I know there's been some curiosity about this house, and about this party," I continued, my voice steady. I took one step up onto the first glass tread, then a second, to the landing, so I was just slightly elevated, the ocean and the city lights a perfect backdrop. "So I wanted to thank you all for attending my housewarming." I paused. I looked out at the room, at the sea of frozen faces. "Welcome to my home." Silence. Not just a lack of sound. This was a vacuum, a heavy, absolute void where the air, the sound, the very life of the party, had been sucked away. I saw Eleanor Vance's eyes widen, her mouth forming a perfect O as the pieces clicked into place in her mind. I saw my father, Douglas, his face go slack, the calculation in his eyes replaced by a sudden, jarring blankness. I saw Gavin, his smug smile frozen, then twitching, as if his brain was refusing to process the words he had just heard. And then, from the back of the room, the sound of a champagne flute slipping from a nerveless hand and shattering on the travertine floor, a sharp, violent crash that made everyone jump. My mother, Marla, was the first to find her voice. It was high, strained, and utterly false. "Harper!" she shrieked, a terrible, forced laugh following. "What a joke! Oh, you're so funny! You're so funny!" She looked around at the other guests, her eyes wide with panic. "She has such a dry sense of humor, she's joking." "Mom," I said, my voice still perfectly calm, still carrying across the room. "I'm not joking." "Don't be ridiculous," my father's voice boomed, recovering. He was already moving toward me, his face darkening with anger. "Get down from there. Harper, what is this? Who put you up to this? This isn't funny." He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me down from the step, to pull me back into the shadows. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I looked at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. I pulled my arm free, not with a jerk, but with a slow, deliberate motion. I was no longer speaking to the room. I was speaking to him, to them. "This house was purchased on November 12th, I said, my voice cutting and clear. "By Ocean Quill Holdings, an LLC I founded." Gavin's face went white. He knew what an LLC was. It was purchased for the full asking price of $5.2 million, I continued, my eyes locked on his. As an all-cash offer. The room inhaled. There was no bank, I said, my gaze shifting to my father. There was no financing. There was no bridge loan, just a direct wire transfer, which cleared in a single afternoon. I let that fact hang in the air. I want to thank our broker, Lydia Cortez, for her incredible speed and discretion in closing the deal in just 7 days. I saw Lydia, standing in the back, raise her glass to me, a slow, satisfied smile on her face. I looked back at my family. My father's hand was still raised, frozen in the air where my arm had been. My mother's face was a mask of horrified understanding, and Gavin just looked broken. The smugness, the confidence, all of it, just gone. I looked out at the silent, stunned crowd. No one was laughing, no one was smiling, no one was moving at all. I had, with 20 seconds of simple, unadorned fact, burned their entire world to the ground. The silence, having shattered, reformed, it was no longer a void of shock, but a thick, heavy blanket of observation. Every guest in the room was now an audience member, and they were watching the Lang family implode in real time. My father's hand was still half raised, his face a mottled mask of confusion and rage. My mother was visibly trembling, her eyes darting between me and the guests, in a frantic, horrified calculation of the social damage. And Gavin just stared, his face, which 5 minutes ago had been so full of smug certainty, was now slack. He looked like a man who had been told the laws of physics had just been repealed. He was the first to move. It was a slow, stumbling motion. He lurched away from my father, pushing past a stunned developer, and made his way to the bar. He wasn't walking like a fund manager. He was walking like a drunk. He grabbed the bar rail with both hands to steady himself, his back to the room. The bartender, one of my team, discreetly slid a glass of water toward him, which he ignored. I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped down from the landing onto the main floor. The sea of guests parted for me, their expressions a mix of awe, respect, and pity, not for me, but for the family I had just dismantled. I walked, not to my family, but to the bar. I stood a few feet away from my brother. I ordered a club soda with a lime. The bartender, a true professional, served me as if nothing had happened. Gavin didn't turn around. He just spoke to the rows of bottles in front of him, his voice a low, ragged rasp. It was hoarse with a disbelief so profound it was almost violent. "Where?" he spat, his knuckles white on the bar rail. "Where did you get the money?" He still wasn't looking at me. He couldn't. I took a small, clean sip of my drink. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The entire room was straining to hear. "From my job," I said, my voice as cool and clear as the glass in my hand. "The one you never asked about." He flinched, a small spasm in his shoulders. "What job?" he seethed. "What job gives you $5 million? You're stupid? Your hobby? Your blankets?" "My hobby," I said, turning to look at him, though he still faced away, "is called Arcadia and Loom. You called it a craft project for housewives in Ohio." I set my glass down. Those housewives gave my hobby a gross annual revenue last year of $140 million. Someone in the room gasped. I heard my father make a choked, gagging sound. Gavin's head whipped around. His face was paper white, his eyes burning with a desperate, frantic denial. "You're lying." "I don't need to lie, Gavin," I said, my voice hardening, the cold precision of the boardroom taking over. "We moved over 3 million units. We operate 3 distribution centers, totaling over 100,000 square feet. The knockoff pottery you insulted in front of Eleanor Vance is part of my Aurora line, which is projected to gross 20 million alone this year." I leaned in, just slightly, though my voice was still loud enough for the first few rows of guests to hear. "You asked where the 5.2 million came from. It came from my corporate cash reserves, which, as of this morning, were in the high eight figures. I didn't get a loan. I didn't need creative financing. I just signed a check from the little shop. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. He had built his entire identity on being the one who understood money, and I had just shown him he wasn't even qualified to be in the conversation. The crushing silence that followed was broken by a new voice, a crisp, authoritative one. "Ms. Lang? Harper?" I turned. Eleanor Vance, the editor from Architectural Digest, was stepping forward, her eyes bright with a sharp, professional hunger. She had a look of profound respect on her face. She had completely ignored Gavin, as if he were just a piece of furniture. She was holding one of the small Aurora vases in her hand, the one he had called a fake. "I have to say," Eleanor said, raising her champagne glass, "this is, without a doubt, the most compelling brand story I have ever encountered, ever." She held up the vase. "You're the founder of Arcadia and Loom, the one who wrote that piece in Dezeen, the one who's been hiding from the press for 2 years. My God." She was connecting the dots, and she was doing it in front of everyone. "I need to interview you," she said, her voice dropping. "Not a column, a full feature. I'm talking cover story. I want to talk about sustainable materials, the supply chain, and how you built this, and how you designed this." She gestured to the whole house. "Congratulations, Ms. Lang. You've been a ghost for too long." She raised her glass. "To the host?" It was a signal. It was permission. The party, which had frozen, suddenly rebooted, a wave of applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous, erupted through the room. People were raising their glasses, not to the Lang family, but to me. I was shaking, but I smiled. "I would be happy to, Eleanor. Thank you." And then, another voice, booming, false. "That's my girl, that's my daughter." My father. He was pushing through the crowd, his face now reset into a mask of proud, paternalistic control. He had found his angle. If you can't beat them, own them. He clapped me on the back, hard enough to hurt, and put his arm around my shoulders, possessively. "I knew it," he announced to Eleanor, to the room. "I always said this one. She's the quiet one, but she's the shark. She gets it from her old man, right?" He was trying to take credit. He was trying to reabsorb my success into his narrative. "Harper, we need to talk," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, business tone, though still loud enough for those around us to hear. $140 million? Why are you sitting on 8 figures in cash? That's dead money. It's time for a real strategic consultation. I'm going to set you up with my guys. We need to leverage that. We need to talk acquisitions. We'll set up a meeting. Monday morning, my office. He was giving me orders. After a lifetime of ignoring me, he was now, in front of all my guests, trying to become my CEO. I didn't pull away. I just let his arm get heavy. I turned my head and smiled at him, a bright, polite, and utterly empty smile. "Dad," I said, my voice light, "what a kind offer, but I already have a COO and a board." I gently slipped out from under his arm and turned to the developer I had seen him talking to earlier. "Mark, isn't it? I'm so glad you could come. I've been admiring your work on the new Torrey Pines complex. I'd love to hear about the materials you're using for the water-saving features." I had just turned my back on him. I had dismissed him, publicly. I left him standing there, his arms still in the air, with Eleanor Vance and my brother watching. The cut was so clean, so absolute. He couldn't even protest without making a scene. As I walked away with the developer, I felt a presence at my elbow. It was Silas, a tray of appetizers in his hand, perfectly playing the part of a guest. He leaned in, his voice a whisper against my ear, his expression fixed in a polite smile. "The audio feed in the security room is illuminating," he said. "But I have something better. I just got a text from my contact at Gavin's bank." "And?" I murmured, pretending to admire the view. It wasn't a rumor. Gavin's primary fund just imploded. He was over-leveraged in 3 e-commerce startups that all went bankrupt last week. The bank wasn't just dragging its feet on his loan. They were preparing to make a margin call. He's not just broke, Harper. He's in the red. I processed this. The boast about the bridge loan, the posturing. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a desperate, drowning person's last grasp for a lifeline. He hadn't just been trying to buy a house. He'd been trying to create a narrative of success to stave off his own financial extinction. I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. It was just data. A final, clarifying fact. "Thank you, Silas," I said, picking a piece of shrimp from his tray. "Please, enjoy the party. You've earned it." He nodded and melted back into the crowd. I spent the next hour being the person they never knew I was. I talked business with venture capitalists. I talked aesthetics with architects. I talked logistics with shipping magnates. The power in the room had shifted. The crowd no longer orbited my father or my brother. They orbited me. My family was left isolated, a toxic island that the tide of the party had receded from. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, my mother approached. She had been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. She looked small, and for the first time, old. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Harper," she whispered, her voice thick. "My baby, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry I doubted you." It was the apology I had craved for 20 years, but hearing it now, I knew it wasn't real. It was just another tool of control. It was the apology that asked, "Now that I've said I'm sorry, you will make this better, won't you? You will fix this? You will bring us back into your new, shiny world?" It was a plea for re-entry, disguised as remorse. I gently extracted my hand from hers. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a new, cold clarity. "You don't need to apologize, Mom." Her face brightened, a flicker of hope. "You just need to respect me," I finished. Her face fell. She hadn't wanted a new boundary. She had wanted absolution. She had wanted me to be her daughter, the fixer. One last time. I had just informed her that that person was gone. She turned and walked away, back to her husband, who was standing alone by the door, staring at a phone that was not ringing. The last guest left. The caterers cleaned up and vanished. Silas had gone. It was just me. I stood in the center of the great room, the lights of the city glittering below. The house was silent, save for the hum of the climate control and the distant sound of the waves. I walked to the massive glass wall, the one that faced the dark, empty expanse of the Pacific. I could see my own reflection in the glass, a pale, dark-clad figure outlined against the night. I looked at my own eyes. I had come here tonight expecting a battle. I had expected to feel victorious, or angry, or vindicated. I had expected to feel the win. But I didn't. The all-consuming fire of rage and need that had driven me for a decade was just gone. It hadn't been extinguished by my family's defeat. It had simply burned itself out. I had done it. I had proven them wrong, and in the end, it didn't even matter. I was no longer the daughter begging to be seen. I was no longer the sister fighting for a scrap of approval. I was just me in my house. I looked at the woman in the glass, and for the first time in my life, I felt a deep, profound, and absolute stillness. I didn't need their recognition. I had my own. The party was Saturday, on Sunday. I did not answer the phone. I sat in the glass house, which I now realized was not a home but a fortress, and I watched the ocean. The stillness I had felt was not an ending, it was a calibration. On Monday morning, I was not at the La Jolla house. I was in my real home, the lab, at the Arcadia and Loom headquarters. The air smelled of sandalwood and new projections. Silas was waiting, as he always was. He did not mention the party. He did not ask about my family. He had already monitored the security footage, cataloged the interactions, and moved on. He placed a single tablet on my desk. "Good morning, Harper," he said. "The 2 items you requested have been finalized." I looked at him. Both? Both. The first, he said, tapping the screen. The Portside Logistics Warehouse. The wire transfer for the acquisition was confirmed at 8:05 a.m. The property is ours. I nodded. This was the first move, the one I had planned weeks ago. Long before the house, Urban Hearth was our largest competitor. They were flashy, well-funded, and, according to my analysis, deeply inefficient. Their entire West Coast operation ran through a single, massive warehouse near the port, a warehouse I had just bought out from under them. The leaseback proposal? I asked. They have until 5 p.m. today to respond, Silas said. We offered to lease the space back to them at a 20% market increase. They are, as expected, furious. They are trying to find another facility, but there is nothing else that large near the port. They won't find one, I said. And the second item? The one that matters. A very faint smile touched Silas's lips. The Seven Sisters, our key suppliers, the ones Urban Hearth was also using. They weren't just using them. Silas, they were abusing them. They were demanding 90-day payment terms and switching contracts every 6 months. Exactly, Silas said. Which is why, as of this morning, all 7 have signed 3-year exclusive contracts with Arcadia and Loom, the weavers in Portugal, the Glass Collective in Poland, the Woodworking Co-op in Vietnam. We offered them 15-day payment terms and a 5% bonus on all orders for the first year. They are ours. All of them. This was the true chess move. I hadn't just bought the building Urban Hearth operated out of. I had just bought their entire supply chain. So, I said, summarizing the move, as of today, our largest competitor has no facility to ship from and no products to ship. Their infrastructure just ceased to exist, Silas confirmed, his voice flat. We anticipate their delivery times will jump from 2 days to indefinite by the end of the week. Their customer service complaints have already risen 30% since the announcement went out to the suppliers this morning. A market report pinged on my screen. It was from a top-tier industry analyst. The headline was simple: The Disruptor. The report said, Arcadia and Loom, long considered a quiet, high-quality player, has just shown its teeth. In a move of stunning logistical precision, they have effectively consolidated the high-end sustainable decor market in a single quarter. This is no longer a disruptor. This is a takeover. I closed the report. It was just noise. There is one more piece to this, Silas, I said. The leverage. Urban Hearth has been surviving on one thing, and it wasn't revenue, it was debt. Yes, Silas said. He knew exactly what I was referring to. A $5 million leveraged loan, which they took out 2 years ago to cover their aggressive marketing. A loan, I said. That was not backed by a traditional bank. It was backed by a private equity fund, one that was clearly desperate to get into the e-commerce game and failed to do its due diligence. Lang Capital, Silas said, stating the name like a simple, harmless fact. My brother's fund, I said, the words tasting like ash. The loan, as I recall, is nearing maturity. It matures at close of business tomorrow, Silas said, tapping his tablet again. And with their primary warehouse assets sold and their supply chain severed, Urban Hearth has just violated the collateral and revenue covenants of the loan. They are in default, as of right now. I stared at the wall. The pieces were all in place. The party on Saturday night, Gavin's drunken, desperate question. Where did you get the money? It was all cast in a new, pathetic light. He hadn't just been angry that I had surpassed him. He had been terrified. He had been projecting. His own fund, his entire identity, was tied to a failing company that I, his sister, was in the process of dismantling piece by piece. When they default, I said, the bank that holds the note will auction their remaining assets, the brand, the intellectual property, the customer list. The auction is scheduled for next week, Silas said. A bankruptcy court proceeding. It will be fast, and it will be quiet. Position us as the sole bidder, I said. I don't want to just beat them. I want to acquire them. at a discount. 1 week later, I sat in a sterile downtown courtroom. It was not a glamorous auction. It was a procedural hearing. The Urban Hearth founders were there, looking gray and defeated. My brother was not. He was, I assumed, at home, having his own encounter with reality. The judge called the case. Silas, representing Ocean Quill Holdings, made the offer. It was the only offer. I signed the final papers, acquiring the entire asset library of my largest competitor, my brother's failed investment, for the bankruptcy price of 12 cents on the dollar. The fallout in the trade media was immediate, and it was brutal, but it wasn't focused on Urban Hearth. It was focused on Gavin. Lang Capital's failure in due diligence, one headline read, raises serious questions about the fund's viability. Another, more pointed, the Urban Hearth collapse, orchestrated by the silent shark Arcadia and Loom, was made possible only by the astonishing incompetence of its primary investor, Gavin Lang, who appears to have funded a company without understanding its basic supply chain. One source calls it Finance 101, failed. My father's world was finally talking about his son, just not in the way he'd always hoped. My personal phone, the one I kept on my desk for my family, began to ring. I looked down. The screen lit up. Mom. I watched it ring. 1, 2, 3. It went to voicemail. I put the phone face down on the desk. It rang again, immediately. Mom. The vibration was frantic, a trapped, buzzing sound against the polished wood. I didn't pick it up. I let it buzz. A futile, angry noise in the quiet of my office. Silas, who was gathering his papers, looked at the phone, then at me. That seems insistent, he said. It's my mother, I said. Would you like me to send any message, a press release, a statement? To anyone? He was asking if I wanted to gloat. He was asking if I wanted to twist the knife, to send a message to my father, or to the press, or to Gavin, to confirm that. Yes, I had done this. I had done it all. I looked at the phone, still buzzing, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The coldness from the party was gone. There was just work. No, Silas, I said. We don't need to send a message. The numbers are the message. The numbers will do all the talking necessary. Let them speak for themselves. He nodded, understanding. I'll be at the new facility. I'll meet you there, I said. That afternoon, I did not go to the glass house in La Jolla. I drove down to the port, to the massive 40,000-square-foot warehouse I had just acquired, the one that had been the throat of Urban Hearth. It was vast, concrete, and smelled of salt air and diesel. The ceilings were high. The loading bays were empty. The Urban Hearth employees who had been transferred in the acquisition were standing in a nervous, quiet group, huddled around the foreman. They were expecting to be fired. They were the casualties of a war they didn't understand. Silas met me at the door. The foreman's name is Carlos, he said. I walked straight over, past the nervous crowd, and held out my hand. Carlos, I'm Harper Lang. He looked at my hand, then at my face, and took it. His grip was strong, calloused. Ma'am, we were told to wait for you. My team is anxious. I'm not surprised, I said. Turning to the group, I didn't raise my voice, but it carried in the vast space. My name is Harper Lang. I'm the founder of Arcadia and Loom, and as of this morning, we are your new employers. I know what you've heard. I know what you're expecting. I paused. So let's be clear. Every one of you is still employed. Your pay rates are not changing, except to go up, to match the Arcadia and Loom scale. Effective on your next paycheck, your health insurance is being upgraded. This is not the end of this warehouse. This is the beginning of its new life as our primary West Coast logistics hub. I saw shoulders relax. I saw the fear in their eyes replaced by a cautious confusion. I walked with Carlos through the facility. I shook hands. I asked about the forklifts. I asked about the software. I was not my father, who broke companies and people like Lydia Cortez and left them for dead. I was not my brother, who used money as a toy and flew too close to the sun. I stopped at the edge of the loading bay, looking up at the massive, flat roof. "Silas," I said, "the roof is solid." "Yes," he said. "Structurally sound, 40,000 square feet." "Good," I said, turning back to the foreman. "I want to install a full solar panel array on it. I want this entire building to be off the grid and running on its own power within 6 months. I also want a budget for retrofitting every light in here to high-efficiency LEDs. And Silas will be setting up a program for tuition reimbursement for any of your team who wants to take classes." Carlos just stared at me. "Solar panels, ma'am, that's a lot of money." "It's a lot of power," I corrected him. "It's an investment. We don't build things to break. Carlos, we build them to last." I stood there, in the mouth of the loading bay, watching a massive container ship glide into the port. The victory at the party felt distant, a small, petty emotional flare. This felt real. The anger that had fueled me for a decade was gone. It had been replaced by the quiet, heavy, satisfying weight of responsibility. My family thought the game was about winning. They thought the victory was in the takedown, in the public declaration, in the house on the cliff. They were wrong. I looked at the buzzing, vibrant life of the port, at the work that needed to be done. The real game wasn't about breaking things, it was about building them. And I was just getting started. The week after my acquisition of Urban Hearth, the silence from my family was a living thing. It was a dense, suffocating pressure, a void where their frantic, buzzing calls had been. My mother's phone number, which had lit up my screen a dozen times an hour, went dark. The silence was not peace. It was the sound of them regrouping, of their terror and rage metastasizing into a new, desperate strategy. I knew the request would come. It arrived on Friday, not as a call, but as a single, formal email from my father's office account to my corporate one. Subject: Urgent family matter. The email was 3 sentences long. "We need to speak with you in person. This is about the future of this family. We request a meeting at your house, this Sunday, at the old time." The old time. 6 p.m., the hour of the ritual Sunday dinner. The one that had been the stage for my public humiliation for a decade. The arrogance of the request was breathtaking. They were still trying to dictate the terms, still trying to summon me using the old language of duty. I replied with one word: "Confirmed." I also made 2 calls. The first was to Silas. "The family is coming on Sunday. Please ensure the house is appropriately staffed for a business meeting, no food, no drinks, just water, and have the full security detail on active, silent alert." "Understood," he said. "And Silas," I added, "please ask David Rowe from our legal team to be there. Have him arrive at 5:30. May I ask what his stated purpose will be?" "My new estate planner," I said. "This is, after all, a family matter." Sunday came. The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long, bloody-looking shadows through the glass walls of the great room. The house was cold. The climate control set to a precise 68 degrees. I was not dressed for dinner. I was wearing a pair of severe gray wool trousers and a black silk blouse. I was dressed for a deposition. David Rowe, a man with a face made of granite and a mind like a steel trap, was sitting on one of the sofas, his briefcase beside him, when the doorbell chimed at 6 p.m. on the dot. I opened the door myself. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father, Douglas, was in a suit, but it looked too large for him, his usual bullish confidence replaced by a sallow, gray pallor. My mother, Marla, was beside him, her face a ravaged mask of tears and tranquilizers. She was clutching his arm. And behind them, a ghost, Gavin. He was thin. He hadn't shaved. His eyes, once so bright with smug superiority, were dull, empty, and fixed on the floor. He didn't look like a failed fund manager. He looked like a man who had already been sentenced. "Come in," I said. My voice echoed in the travertine entryway. They walked into the great room, the one that had been the scene of my party, my unveiling. They looked at the space, not with envy, but with the look of people who have been brought to the headquarters of the enemy that had conquered them. "Harper," my father began, his voice a hoarse attempt at its old, booming authority. "Please, sit," I said, gesturing to the hard, architectural sofas opposite David Rowe. I took a chair at the head of the arrangement, a single, throne-like seat. "This is David Rowe, my legal counsel. He is here to observe and advise on my behalf." The sight of a lawyer visibly terrified them. Marla let out a small, strangled squeak. "A lawyer?" Douglas said, his voice cracking. "My God. Harper, this is family." "This is a business meeting," I corrected him. "You said so yourself. It's about the future of the family. I am treating it with the seriousness it deserves. Please, begin." My father sat down, heavily. Marla collapsed next to him. Gavin remained standing, a phantom hovering near the door, until my father barked. "Sit down, Gavin." Douglas tried to regain control. He laced his fingers, trying to look like the patriarch. "Harper, what happened at that party? What was said? It was a shock to us all. Your success. It's incredible, truly." It was the praise I had waited my whole life to hear, and it tasted like poison. He was trying to flatter me. "Get to the point, Dad," I said. His face tightened. The flattery had failed. He switched to crisis mode. "Gavin's fund," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "It's gone. A total loss. He was over-leveraged. Those e-commerce companies. A house of cards. It's all gone." "I read about it," I said, my voice empty of emotion. "You don't understand." He slammed his hand on the sofa arm. "He wasn't just leveraged. He is personally liable. The margin calls. They're catastrophic. They're going to wipe him out. They're going to wipe us out." So there it was. Marla, on cue, burst into a fresh wave of tears. "Harper, please," she wailed, lunging forward, her hands grasping at the air. "He's your brother. You have to help us. After all we've done for you. This family is all we have. You're so successful. You're so rich. This is just a drop in the ocean for you. You can't let them destroy your brother. You can't let them take our home." The raw, desperate, emotional blackmail was so textbook it was almost boring. I looked at her, my face a mask. "I will not have this conversation," I said. "Harper," she shrieked. "I will not have a conversation based on tears and vague threats," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "I am a businesswoman. You have come to my house, at your request, to discuss a financial matter. So, we will discuss it, with facts." I turned to David. David Rowe opened his briefcase. "Mr. Lang," he said, his voice a cold baritone, "if you are requesting a capital infusion or a loan from my client, we will require a full, transparent accounting of all outstanding debts, collateral, and associated liabilities. We have," he gestured to my smart home hub, "a high-speed printer and scanner. We are prepared to review all documents, now." My father stared, dumbfounded. He had come for a tearful reunion, a check written on guilt. He had walked into an audit. Gavin, from his corner, spoke for the first time, a dead mumble. "It's in the car." "Go get it," I said. He flinched at my command, but he went. He returned with a battered leather satchel, a bag I recognized as my father's. He dumped it on the glass table. It was full of unopened envelopes, red-stamped final notice, and terrifyingly official-looking loan binders. For the next hour, David and I sorted through the financial ruin of my family. The room was silent except for the rustle of paper and Marla's muffled sobs. It was worse than I thought. Gavin hadn't just been over-leveraged. He had been reckless, bordering on fraudulent. "This one," David said, holding up a document. "This is a personal guarantee. Douglas, Marla, you co-signed, you pledged your own house, the La Jolla Villa, as collateral against his fund's margin calls." "He told us it was a formality," Marla cried. It was not a formality. Mrs. Lang, it was a guarantee. You are on the hook for every dollar he lost. And according to this, that's north of $12 million. My father put his head in his hands. I felt nothing. I just continued to sort. I was looking for the edges of the problem, the full extent of the rot. And then I found it. It was at the bottom of the pile, a thin, forgotten-looking file from a small, local credit union I had never heard of. The file was for a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, the kind of loan you take out against your house for a renovation. But the property address wasn't the La Jolla Villa. It was my old condo, the one I had bought myself, before Arcadia and Loom, the one I had sold years ago. No, not sold. I had transferred it into an LLC. I opened the file. The loan was for $50,000. It was dated 5 years ago, a year I had spent almost entirely in Portugal, living in a cheap flat, desperately trying to build my new supply chain. And at the bottom of the loan origination, on the signature line, was my name, Harper Lang. It was a good forgery. The loops were right. The slant was almost perfect. But it was not my signature. The room, which had been cold, suddenly felt like a vacuum. I slid the paper across the glass table. "David," I said. My voice was low. David picked it up. His eyes scanned it, then scanned it again. He looked at the date. Then he looked at me. "Harper," he said, his voice flat. "Your passport? The old one. Where is it?" "In my office safe," I said. He didn't need it. I had the visas memorized. "I was in Lisbon," I said. "From March of that year until December, I was not in the United States." David took his phone, snapped a high-resolution photo of the signature, and then a photo of the entire document. "For the record," he said. I looked up. I looked at the three of them. My father, who had his head in his hands. My mother, who had stopped crying and was now just a statue of fear. And Gavin, who was staring, absolutely terrified, at the paper on the table. I did not scream. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just asked the question. My voice was perfectly quiet. "Who signed my name?" My father wouldn't look up. He just shook his head, a gesture of pathetic denial. Gavin looked at the floor, at the ceiling, at his hands, anywhere but at me. It was my mother who broke. Her voice was a ragged whisper, a final, desperate attempt at justification. Gavin needed the money. It was just a little bit. We knew you had the equity. It was for the family. Harper, it was just to protect the family. To protect you from... From what? I asked. Protect me from what? From knowing you had forged my name? From knowing you had committed a felony, a federal crime, in my name, against my own property? "It was for the family," she shrieked, the words now a meaningless, insane mantra. I stood up. "David," I said, "I believe we have all the facts we need." "Harper," my father said, finally looking up, his eyes wide with animal panic. Don't do this." I walked to the glass wall and looked out at the ocean. The battle was over. The war was over. And I had not just won. I had been handed a nuclear weapon. "This is what is going to happen," I said, my back to them. "This meeting is over. The social part of our relationship is over. We are now in a legal and financial negotiation, and I am holding all the cards." I turned around. "1, Gavin, I will not give you $1. Not now, not ever. The margin calls are your problem. The debt is your problem. You will declare bankruptcy, and you will face your own consequences. I will not save you." Gavin just crumpled, all the air leaving him. 2, Dad, Mom, I looked at them. "You will lose your house. You will be named in the bankruptcy. You will be ruined. That is the fact. That is what you have earned." "Harper, you can't!" Marla screamed. "I can," I said. "However, I am considering a different path, not for your sake, but for my own. I will not have my parents homeless. That is an aesthetic I do not enjoy." I walked back to the table. "David is going to draft a proposal. I will establish a small, irrevocable trust. It will be enough for a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It will cover your health insurance and your basic living expenses. It will be managed by a third-party trustee, and you will never, ever have direct control of the funds. It will be, in short, a dignified and minimal existence. My father looked, for a second, relieved. But, I said, and my voice was so cold it hurt. That proposal is contingent. It is not an offer, it is a possibility, and it is dependent on 3 non-negotiable prerequisites. I held up one finger. First, I will receive a full written confession, signed by all 3 of you, detailing the events of the forgery. This document will be notarized and held by my lawyer. If I ever hear the words, "for the family" again, I will release it. I held up a second finger. Second, you will cooperate, fully and completely, with David and the bank to have my name removed from that fraudulent loan. You will sign whatever you need to sign, admit whatever you need to admit, to make this legal poison go away. You will take the liability upon yourselves. I held up a third finger. And finally, you will provide a written, formal apology, not to me, but to Arcadia and Loom, for the reputational damage I will have to mitigate in cleaning up your mess. I let the terms hang in the air. This is the only door, I said. It is the only path forward that does not end in your total destruction. David will send the paperwork to your lawyer. You have 24 hours to accept. I turned and walked out of the room, up the glass staircase, and into my office, leaving them to sit in the ruins of their own making, in the cold, magnificent house they would never be welcome in again. The 24 hours I gave them passed in a silence so total it was louder than any scream. They had no other moves. They had no other doors. They had, as I knew they would, accepted my terms. The meeting was not at my house. It was not at their house. It was in a beige, windowless conference room at a neutral ground bank, a place that smelled of old carpet and financial compliance. My father, mother, and Gavin were already there when David Rowe and I arrived. They were sitting on one side of the polished mahogany table, looking small and ill. We sat on the other. Between us sat a bank officer, a representative from the credit union that held the fraudulent loan, and a woman introduced as a forensic handwriting expert. The expert spoke first. Her voice was clinical, devoid of emotion. I have reviewed the signature on the home equity line of credit document dated 3 years prior, and I have compared it to a dozen certified examples of Ms. Harper Lang's signature from the same time period. The document in question, the loan agreement, is a forgery. It is a competent forgery, but it is definitively not the signature of Harper Lang. A heavy silence fell. The bank officer looked at my father. My father's face was the color of spoiled milk. David Rowe spoke, his voice filling the room. "We are here, in good faith, to resolve this matter. My client, Ms. Lang, is the victim of a felony. She has every right to contact the district attorney and pursue criminal charges for identity theft and aggravated fraud." My mother let out a small, strangled sob, which David ignored. "However," he continued, "my client is not interested in a criminal circus. If, and only if, a civil remediation is completed to her absolute satisfaction, we have prepared an agreement." He slid a thick bound document across the table. "This agreement stipulates the following. 1. Mr. and Mrs. Lang will assume full and immediate liability for the $50,000 loan, plus all accrued interest and penalties. 2. The credit union will, in exchange, purge Ms. Lang's name and social security number from this loan, effective immediately, and provide a notarized letter of absolution. 3. Mr. and Mrs. Lang and Mr. Gavin Lang will sign the attached notarized confession, which will be held in trust by my firm." Gavin, who had been staring at his hands, suddenly looked up. His voice was a raw croak. "A confession? With my name in it? It wasn't just me. It was a conspiracy." "Mr. Lang," David said, his voice like ice, "you benefited. You will sign." "Please," Gavin begged, his eyes darting to me, then away. If this gets out, in the press, it will destroy me. I'm already ruined. This is too much. I'll sell my car. It's not much. But it's a start. I have a watch. I'll pay it back. I'll pay you back. Harper, just don't make me sign that. Don't put my name on the news. He was begging to keep his name out of the press for a $50,000 forgery when he had lost millions of dollars of other people's money. He still didn't understand the scale. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. I had not spoken a word. My terms are not a negotiation. Gavin, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. The deadline I gave you was for acceptance, not for a counteroffer. You will sign the confession. Your name will be on it. Whether it ever sees the press is entirely up to your future behavior. I turned to David. All financial transactions related to this will be handled through a third-party escrow account. I will not be meeting with them again. I will not be taking their calls. This is the last time I will see this document, or them, in a business context. Is that clear? Perfectly, David said. My father, who had been a statue, finally moved. He leaned forward, his hands clasped, a grotesque imitation of his old patriarchal power. He tried to find the old world, emotional lever that had always worked. Harper, he said, his voice thick. My little girl, I remember when you were 7 years old. You fell off your bike. You cut your knee. You were so brave. You didn't even cry until I picked you up. I carried you all the way home. He was trying to make me his daughter again. He was trying to find the child who had needed him. I let the silence stretch. I let his pathetic, manipulative memory hang in the air and rot. I looked at him. Love is not collateral, Dad, I said. You don't get to use a memory of affection to guarantee a loan for a crime. That account is empty. Sign the papers. His face crumpled. The last lever had broken in his hand. One by one, they signed. My mother's hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. Gavin's signature was a spidery, defeated scrawl. My father just signed, his eyes dead. David and I left. We didn't look back. The next day, I was in my own office, in the glass house, overlooking the ocean. The house was no longer an LLC. I had signed my own papers. The stack sat on my desk, finalized by David. Ocean Quill Holdings had been dissolved and its sole asset, the house, had been transferred. It was now the Harper Lang Living Trust. I had put my name on it, in public, for the world to see. It was no longer a secret, no longer a weapon. It was just a fact. An email arrived at 2:17 p.m. It was from David. Subject: Confirmation. The body was short. The civil agreement is in full effect. The credit union has confirmed your name is cleared and the liability is transferred. The court has filed the stipulation. You are free and clear. The confession is locked in the firm's vault. I closed the email. On my desk was one last document. It was the trust I had promised. The small, irrevocable fund for my parents. I had set the terms. It was conditional on their adherence to the agreement. It was, as I had promised, a dignified, minimal, and completely controlled existence. It was a cage, but it was a comfortable one. I signed the last page, authorizing the first transfer. I sent a copy of the transparent payment schedule to their new, court-appointed financial advisor. I had done what I said I would do. The last thread, the one of duty, was cut. Later that week, I was standing in the great room when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. It was not a scheduled arrival. I looked at the security feed. It was Gavin, alone. He was on foot. He must have parked down the street and walked. He stood at the gate, in the rain. Looking up at the house, he buzzed. I answered. My voice piped through the speaker. Yes? Harper. His voice was small, broken by the wind. Please, I have to ask. I just need to ask one thing. I was silent. Then I pressed the button. The heavy gate slid open. I met him at the front door. I did not let him in. He stood on the mat, dripping water, looking, for the first time, like my brother, a younger brother, small, lost, and pathetic. "I signed it all," he whispered. I'm selling everything. I'm going to declare bankruptcy. I'm ruined." "Yes," I said. "You are—" "Is this it?" he asked, his eyes desperate, searching my face for something, for any flicker of the old dynamic. Is it over? Is there any way back?" He was asking if there was a way back into the family, a way back to the money, a way back to being Gavin Lang, the chosen one. I looked at him, the rain streaming down his face, and I felt the last, tiny, cold ember of my old rage finally die, leaving nothing but a fine gray ash. "The door to responsibility is always open. Gavin," I said, my voice not unkind, but not warm. It was just true. "You can get a job, you can pay your debts, you can become a man. That door is always open." I paused. "But the door to privilege, the one you've lived behind your whole life, that door is closed, and it's locked." I watched the last light of hope die in his eyes. He understood. I closed the door. When my family finally left the La Jolla villa, when the bank had taken it, I heard they moved into the apartment I had funded. I did not watch them go. I was in my house. I was standing on the glass landing, the one where I had made my speech. The sun was setting, and the ocean was turning a deep, dark indigo. The sound of the waves, crashing on the rocks below, was like a great, steady, and indifferent heartbeat. It was the sound of something real. I heard a quiet footstep. It was Silas. He was carrying 2 cups of tea. He didn't speak. He never did. In these moments, he didn't need to. He handed me one. He simply placed a thin tablet on the railing in front of me. On the screen was a new design. It was a single, beautiful, hand-blown glass vase with a subtle, internal structure. It was strong, and it was clear. At the bottom, in our company's clean font, was the name of the new collection. It was one word: proof. He nodded, once, and left me alone. I touched my hand to the glass railing. It was cool, smooth, and unbreakably strong. I had my house, I had my company, I had my life. I realized, as the last sliver of sun disappeared, that victory wasn't about the party, it wasn't about the money, or the confession, or the look on my father's face. Victory was not about making someone else lose. Victory was about finally, completely, and absolutely no longer needing them to decide who I was. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Please comment below and let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.